Okay, is someone going to count us down, or?
Am I counting?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Hi everyone, welcome into week 4 of Sun Times Game Week here in the Sun Times studio. I'm Annie Costabile alongside Michael O'Brien, Beth Long. We've got a lot to cover this week, but before we get into that, we just want to thank our new content partner, ABC7. They're sharing our live stream right now on their Facebook page too, so we want to welcome in all those ABC7 viewers. Reminder to you all who don't know, if you have any questions for us throughout the show, please submit those on Facebook. Without further ado, we got to get into our top news of the day before we get into our Super 25. A lot of movement in the Super 25, but before we touch on that, let's talk about the top breaking news.
It's all basketball news, not a lot of football news. We're still a basketball town. The big news, I think, of the last week in basketball was Chris Roberts, who not a lot of people know. He didn't have big name recognition last year, but he was a star for Lincoln Park. He's a great athlete, just an incredibly fast guard. He's left Lincoln Park, and he is at Morgan Park. So once again, I think this is at least the 4th or 5th year running that Morgan Park has added a really talented guard to their backcourt. I mean, he's really going to do a lot of things for Nick Irvin and the Mustangs, and this should probably raise his profile. He's the kind of kid that not a lot of people know now, but in April, don't be surprised if a lot of the mid-majors are after him. So that's kind of a big move that didn't get a lot of attention. The other big transfer was Greg Outlaw. He's another kid that not a lot of people know about. He's a great athlete, impressive dunker. He went to Bogan the last few years. Now he's at Orr. Things are crowded at Bogan. They've got probably 10 or 12 kids that could start at other teams. So I'm guessing that's kind of behind the move a little bit. But he's going to play a huge part with Orr. Orr needs kind of more high-level bodies like that. They should be a ranked team, but Greg Outlaw is really going to help them. And we just had, a couple minutes ago, Scott Burgess tweeted with the news that junior Micah Schneiders, who went to Chicago Christian. He's one of the best shooters in the area, had an excellent summer with the Mac Irvin Fire. He's leaving Chicago Christian and going to Lincoln Way West, who a couple of years ago made a lot of noise by beating Morgan Park in the Super. So they've picked up a really nice player. And then the last bit of basketball news was Ray J. Dennis, who really came on last year for Oswego East and had just a phenomenal summer. A lot of colleges wanted him. I think he had over 24 offers. He went to Boise State. He committed to Boise State, which
very
kind of
exciting.
A strange one. We don't get that a lot around here.
Right.
But yeah, so he's a kid that we're going to hear a lot about this year. He's one of the highest scoring guards, really regardless of class, in the state. So a lot of movement. I think that should be about it for the transfers. The first day of CPS was Tuesday.
Right.
So we kind of found out who went where. So I think we should probably,
we're at the tail end of transfers.
yes, we should have settled down a little bit by now. That should be about it.
You say that, and I don't know if I believe it. I feel like you just cursed everything.
There could maybe be 1 or 2 more.
I mean, one literally just happened 5 minutes ago, so I probably shouldn't have said that. But
We'll update you as the show goes on if we have any more transfers throughout the show. Obviously, the next exciting topic to talk about, what you all are always waiting for, our Super 25, and there, again, was a ton of movement this week. So, Beth, why don't you kick that off for us and tell us who's in, who's out, and what's going on?
Yeah. Shout out to the fans that found us this week, by the way.
Yes,
there were a couple
appreciate
fans.
you.
Hi again to those of you guys that shared with us that you're watching the show. Keep watching, submit your questions, even if it's things like Beth doesn't know what she's talking about with these Super 25 rankings. With that, let's start with 25.
We appreciate the love and the hate. Keep it coming.
Mostly the love.
Yes.
Number 25, right where they were last week, IC Catholic. Number 24, Naperville Central. They finally got that win.
Yes.
Michael got to see it. Number 23, Bolingbrook. 22, St. Charles East. 21, Hinsdale Central. 20, Prairie Ridge, down from number 12 this week after losing to Huntley. And 19, Huntley, in a close game that they beat Prairie Ridge. 18, Phillips, the biggest drop of the week, 14 spots, down to number 18 from number 4. 17, Willowbrook. 16, Montini. 15, Marist. 14, Brother Rice, holding steady right there, as is Richards at number 13. 12, Loyola, down 10 spots from number 2. 11, Mount Carmel. 10, Simeon. The biggest jump of the week from 20 to 10 is Simeon. I will say Simeon was already in our rankings last week.
Not everybody
We
had
didn't have to
Simeon
make
ranked.
up
They were already there. We already knew they were going to be good. Number 9, Glenbard West. Number 8, Maine South. Number 7, Lake Zurich. Number 6, Barrington. And the top 5, very new look this week. 5, Oswego. 4, Homewood Flossmoor. 3, Nazareth. 2, Batavia. And number 1, still Lincoln Way East. One thing you might notice, there are no new teams in this, and that's because not a single team lost to a team outside of the 25, and I'm a big believer in being fair. You don't lose to a team outside the top 25. I can't drop you out.
Yeah, if you're not losing to a team in the top 25, then how does that make sense to move you out? There are teams that, let's talk about some of the teams that are just on the brink of making it in, though. Stevenson, Bennett, Rolling Meadows, Cary Grove, Providence Catholic. Who are some of these teams that could possibly pop in the next week or two?
I'll tell you, one of the teams that is the most intriguing to me is Wheaton Warrenville South. Coming off a 2-7 year last year, they have already won more games this season at 3-0 than they did last year in 2017. They have a really strong defense. They've allowed 3 points the whole season. 3 points, that's it. 5 interceptions from Joe Ives, who has emerged as a standout on that defense, and they actually have a shot to get in the Super 25 with a game against number 22 St. Charles East on Friday. So I'm really curious to see them play. I also think Cary Grove, Stevenson, to be honest with you, all of these teams that you just named off, they all have a case to be in the Super 25, and I just need a signature win. And some of them have the chance to do that this week playing against other teams in the top 25.
Absolutely. Let's talk a little bit about why some of these teams moved down, up. First, obviously, Phillips dropping 14 spots. That was the biggest drop this week. But they lost to Simeon, which a lot of people, like Coach said in postgame, no one thought we were going to win this game except us. And it's interesting as to why people think that way, because Simeon is not some schmuck team that, isn't competing at a high level, consistently. So why is it that notion that they cannot compete with Phillips? Where does that come from?
I don't think there is. Coaches just like to use things for motivation. I mean, on the show last week, I said I thought they had a chance to win.
Right.
I don't think anybody thought they had no chance to win. I mean, I even saw last year's game was 14-0.
Yeah.
Then they had, 4 or 5 interceptions or turnovers. So you know how that goes with football. Sometimes it just comes down to that, and they didn't do it this time. But worth the jump for sure, I think, for...
I mean, they've been in the Super 25 since the season opened. Simeon has been, so I would say that we thought that they were going to be good this year, which is a matter of how good. And what I know about Simeon is that they are always talented, and it's always about how disciplined they are on the field. And this year, they're proving they are very disciplined. That's how they win games. This team, Simeon, every single year has some of the top talent in the area, and can they work together? And what product do they put out on Friday and Saturdays is what makes the difference, and this year is clearly a good one for him so far.
I mean, he had been an underclassman quarterback. I mean, Alante Brown is a great athlete, but he was learning for the last 2 seasons, and now they have a senior quarterback, and I think in a lot of ways that makes a huge difference.
Yeah, one that's going to Michigan State, too. Definitely doesn't hurt.
Doesn't hurt. We did have a question about the public league team, so let's ask it now. What's been the primary reason for the rise in quality in public league teams and their ability to compete on a state championship level? And that question comes from Jack Gleason.
Yeah, it's I see a lot of public league football, and you never want to be too negative about things, but I think it's pretty clear that while the top of CPS football, which at this point we're talking about 2 or 3 teams, is as good and maybe better than it's been in a long time, the large majority of CPS football is far, far, far worse than it has been historically. I mean, proud programs like Hubbard and Dunbar and King that were regular state playoff teams that used to have 40 kids on the sideline, 50 kids, and longtime coaches, they've got 14 kids, and it's just not what it used to be. And so I think everybody else got a lot worse, and that helped. I think they're just kind of sucking all the air out of the room. All the good players are showing up at Phillips and Simeon, and Raby's getting some, and Curie. And then after that, the drop-off now is pretty severe.
So then I guess what's the reason for that drop-off for other teams? It's just the rise in certain programs and kids transferring?
The charter schools happened. All those noble schools, all those schools, no offense, you've never heard of before, that you see in the standings and rankings that are new in the last 2 or 3 years, those kids had to come from somewhere. And they came from Dunbar and Hubbard and King and the neighborhood schools that are shrinking so much. They used to have 1,000 kids and now have 300 or 200. That's what's happening. I mean, you just can't field a football program when you've only got 100 boys in the school.
On to a couple more reasons as to why teams were moving. Mount Carmel and Loyola, that created a bit of a change there in the top 10. Loyola moving down to number 12, which, I mean, after losing to Mount Carmel the way they did, that was an impressive game, an impressive defensive game for Mount Carmel. I mean, it came down to that final play, and talk about that with us for a second, because you were there, and that was just a huge moment, I think, for Mount Carmel.
Yeah, it was, they just outplayed Loyola the entire game. It was pretty surprising. I have not seen Loyola at home. I haven't seen Loyola anywhere kind of struggle that much offensively, but at home it was very strange to see. I mean, so much credit goes to that Mount Carmel defense. Loyola just couldn't run the ball. I mean, it was Trevor Cabanban, we talked a lot about in the preseason. He finished with -5 yards in the game. They had some other guys try, but nobody was really able to run the ball. They were pretty effective. Rory Booz had like 16 catches, I believe. He had a really great day, but it wasn't enough. And frankly, to get down to that final play, it took 2 very long pass interference calls on Mount Carmel that were kind of iffy. So they didn't even, it's not like they charged down the field for that. They were kind of given it, and then they got there, and Matt Lenti made a really great play, a great tackle. If you watch the video, he's diving in and he grabs, Matthew Schultz, the quarterback, who's not the most mobile guy. Loyola, that's not what they wanted to happen at the end of the game, was Matthew Schultz running with the ball. There aren't really any set plays for him to run. He runs when it's busted, and that must have been a busted play.
Henry Hartsfield wants to know, Evanston Township is undefeated. Will they make their way into the Super 25?
That's a great question with the Henry. So one of my games of the week is actually number 6 Barrington versus Evanston. There are actually a lot of 3-0 teams left, and Evanston is one of the ones that gets a shot to play somebody in the Super 25 and make their case to be in the Super 25. I said earlier, some of these 3-0 teams, I'm looking for a signature win. And what I mean by that is I need a win against a quality opponent who has beaten someone in the Super 25, who is in the Super 25. They come out and they shock the world, I suppose. And Evanston is one of the teams that I have written down here to do that. The last one that I'll throw out there is Cary Grove, who plays number 19 Huntley. This week. So I'm excited to see those 3 games in particular, 3 matchups of 3-0 schools, and we'll really see especially how the Fox Valley and a few other conferences are shaking out.
We're going to review our week 3 games. Obviously, we have to talk about Huntley beating
Prairie Ridge.
Yeah, that was a 30-game win streak. So we'll get into that in a second. Before we do that, I just want to talk a little bit more about the Super 25. The 3 teams that broke into the top 5: Nazareth, Homewood Flossmoor, Oswego. How, why, what were you thinking?
I said earlier in the year, so I'll just read the top 5 for you guys one more time. Number 1, Lincoln Way East. 2, Batavia. 3, Nazareth. And 4, Homewood Flossmoor. 5, Oswego. I said earlier, I think it was the first show that Batavia was ranked, I think, 6th to start with, and that they could be higher. Well, here we are. They're higher. They've continued to show why they are probably the strongest defense in the area. I don't know if I want to make that strong of a statement, but definitely in the conversation for the strongest defense in the area. And they just continue to put up quality wins. I mean, last week they won 43-7 over Lake Park. So I think that they're a really solid contender at number 2. Number 3, Nazareth. Their signature run, let's say, came over Lake Zurich last week when they shut them out. And I don't think anyone is now doubting that the Class 7A might be one of the strongest classes in the state, at least at this point right now, which is strange to say. 4, Homewood Flossmoor, always in the conversation.
Year in and year out.
Always in the conversation. I'm really excited to see them play Bolingbrook. I know that's a pretty big rivalry between the 2 of them. And it's always a really spirited game where truly who knows who can come out on top. And we'll see a lot about the Southwest Suburban Conference this Friday there. And then Oswego, another one, I think of Oswego similarly to Batavia. It's just they play solid football. They don't make a lot of mistakes. They have a really strong defense. I don't see a lot changing for Oswego, certainly in the next couple
Joliet
of
West
weeks.
is taking them down on Saturday.
Oh, there's your bold prediction from Michael O'Brien.
Joliet West is my high school, and I've not been to a Joliet West football game since 1993, but I think I'll go on Saturday.
I think you need to change that.
Yeah. I want to see Oswego, and the Saturday schedule's a little weak, but they probably won't win, but wouldn't it be fun if they do?
I'll bet you guys didn't know that Michael O'Brien went to Joliet West, because I didn't
We
know
all
that.
say where we went to high school. I went to Addison Trail. Beth's an out-of-stater.
I'm from North Carolina. Franklin High School. No one would know what that
I
is.
didn't know you went to Addison Trail.
Yeah, I did.
Look at all we're
Played
learning.
basketball and everything. Shout out to Coach Shader. Okay, anyways, reminder, send in your questions. We're getting a few here, but keep them coming throughout the show. We still have about 15 minutes left. Let's switch gears a little bit here and review week 3.
Yeah.
We've had a lot of excitement. So to start, Michael?
Phillips and Simeon. Let's start out with that one, of course. 21-8, Simeon won. You know, as we talked about a little bit, but the most shocking thing was how the game went. Phillips could not get anything going on offense. Something that should be mentioned that wasn't in my story and didn't get talked about enough on Twitter or anything that night. Rayshon Thompson didn't play. That's Phillips' starting running back. I'm not sure why. He was, I think, at 98 yards against Pickerington Central. And, you know, that's a great team that he ran really well against. So I think that was a huge factor for Phillips because they just could not get anything going on the ground. They had some success in the air. But wow, Simeon I think showed a lot to everybody defensively to be able to shut down Phillips like that.
The most impressive play, Jaleel Billingsley's 72-yard touchdown. That was impressive.
Yeah, the only time Phillips moved the ball was when they hoisted something downfield, and then the 6'5"
which is
so
not Phillips.
Yeah, went and did it.
That is not their
well,
side
that
play.
speaks to what they had to. Simeon just shut them down on the ground. I mean,
Yeah,
they had Jaleel Billingsley to go to, though.
And Simeon has, I talked to Troy McAllister, the Phillips coach, right before the game when we were waiting for it to start, and he knew that Simeon's backup quarterback, he's a junior, Jaquez Woodland. I had not seen him play before. I don't know how Troy McAllister gets his info. He must have seen some tape or something, but he said he was good. And that allows Alante Brown to go out to wide receiver occasionally like he does, and that caused problems. He only caught one pass for 20 yards, but he did get a crucial pass interference call where he was wide open and Phillips had to, foul him to stop him. So that's going to be something to watch all season long, the fact that they have that second quarterback able to move in there to move Alante Brown out. It's just something else you have to worry about. I guess the other kind of key thing for Simeon, we weren't totally sure who their big running backs were going to be. Derek Flowers and D'Angelo Hudson, neither one is spectacular, but both are very effective. And they're the kind of kids that keep pounding, and then eventually they get that 12, 14-yard gain. And it was just a capable performance by Simeon. We know they've always had the athletes and the ability, but they keep shooting themselves in the foot, it seems, year after year in the big game, and that did not happen at all.
Certainly did not. What do we think about Phillips still being the favorite to win the state championship this year? Do we still think that's what's going to happen?
For 6A, yeah.
Okay.
I think so. And they're going to get, Rayshon Thompson will be back. Leonard Smith, this was still just his third game as their quarterback. They'll get better. It's just, you wonder if they might have to rethink things. They play that cover no one defense with literally no safeties.
Very ballsy defense.
Yeah, no one in the backfield. Yeah. So if you can throw the ball at all, it works. I mean, it's very risky, and it didn't pay off against Simeon.
Nope. Next game up was St. Charles East and Wheaton Warrenville South.
That's next week.
Oh, that's
next. That's a
Oh,
preview.
I'm sorry. That's a preview game.
Next up, Mount Carmel.
We're really excited about it.
Yes.
I am.
No, I'm really
That's
excited
later in
about
the
that.
notes. Yeah. Mount Carmel and Loyola, the
yeah.
big one on Saturday. It was 17-12 Mount Carmel. I think we said pretty much everything we need to about that one. Bill Murray was there, which was kind of weird.
It was a star-studded weekend. Bill Murray was at that game. Jabari Parker was at Simeon's and Phillips.
Yeah, that was Bill Murray was strange. He paid attention more than you would have thought. He was kind of over on the same side talking with his classmates. He's a 1968 graduate, so he was there talking about all that stuff. I mean, I guess the big takeaway here, Mount Carmel's defense is great. I don't think it's just good. It's really great because we know what Loyola can do on offense. Loyola is that team that I have trouble keeping their stats because they move the ball so quickly. And just doing the math in my little brain sometimes doesn't work while they're just sailing down the field. And that's like covering every Loyola game. That was not the case on Saturday.
Has this defense grown? Have they grown into being this talented, or has Mount Carmel's defense been this talented?
It's always, that's the thing that didn't change. Frank Lenti left, but his brother's still there.
Right.
And he's the defensive coordinator. So these kids it's the Mount Carmel system. These kids have grown into it for 4 years. All the seniors have known they were going to play this way, and they were going to do it. So it's not weird for Mount Carmel to have a very good defense. The offense is new. Jordan Lynch has, put in a new game plan, and they're learning. And if there's a worry for Mount Carmel, it's that. Rad Primovic, the quarterback, completed 3 passes. They kind of went old Mount Carmel style and just gave up pretty much on the passing game. And we've seen before that can be a problem if you don't have a passing threat.
Is Mount Carmel a team we can see making a deep run in November?
If you can beat Loyola at home, I think you can beat anybody, yeah.
They also know how to play in the playoffs. I mean, Mount Carmel, when you think of teams that are seasoned playoff teams, at least in the last 5 years, Mount Carmel and Loyola are 2 of them. To your point about Mount Carmel defenses, though, when you think back about the prospects and recruits that Mount Carmel has had go into college football, almost all of them have been on the defensive side of the ball and have primarily or only played defense at Mount Carmel. So I wouldn't call them a defensive factory, but they're pretty close.
Yeah, no doubt. It's Barrington and Maine South is up next. 26-23, Barrington won it. The final play was described very well by former Sun-Times stringer Dick Quagliano. Read all about it. It was Tommy Fitzpatrick, the quarterback, lateral out to Eric Darlington, the wide receiver, and he threw it way downfield to Tim Lowe, so a little bit of a trick play. That was the touchdown. Key point here, though, Bobby and Sarah, who we've talked a lot about already, was standing on the sideline in a boot.
Do we know what happened?
It's a leg injury.
He was
quarter.
He was in a boot at the end of the game against Mount Carmel in week 2.
So he's hurt. It sounds like he'll be out for a while. But, Cole Dow came in. Sounds like he did not have a very good first half. And then he kind of grew into the game. I'm sure they'll figure things out. But that was Cole Dow's first start. So,
that's a tough one. That's a real tough one.
Next up is Cary Grove and Huntley. Huntley snapped, I keep previewing the games. Prairie Ridge versus
and Huntley. Yeah, Huntley, 30-game winning streak.
Yes,
the longest winning streak in the state. It's over. They lost 35-28. Huntley did it. I was at that game last year, and the only difference between Huntley and Prairie Ridge was Player of the Year, Samson Evans. And he's gone. So
he's at Iowa.
This year, Huntley wins it. Now, this is unofficial, but Steve Susi, who is like the bracketologist expert on all weird statistical high school football stuff, was on the sidelines at Gately during the Simeon Phillips game. So I asked him, what's the state's longest winning streak now? Because I'm not going to go back and try to figure all of that out. Thought it might have been Lincoln Way East. It's not. It's Tuscola.
Okay.
Which is a suburb, if you want to use that word, of Champaign. It's down, the Champaign area covers it. Yeah. Suburb's a strong word, I guess.
Seems like this got really weird really fast.
It's outside the Champaign area. That's unofficial. I'm pretty sure it's Tuscola. So, and I think they're over 20 games winning streak. They've got, I think, a couple state titles there. So that's what it's moved on to. The player to mention from that game, though, is Chris Raffin. I think we talked about him last week even, too. 246 yards, 2 TDs. He has stepped right in for Huntley's quarterback who graduated, Eric.
Schultz?
Eric.
No. Huntley's quarterback last year, who was very good.
Who
we saw,
Sorry,
he has stepped right in for Huntley, and I feel like the whole Fox Valley area, for all of us Chicago people, it's troubling because we know they're good and we see them at state, and I go up there once a year usually, but it's hard to get a full grasp on those teams because they are far away. We don't see a lot of them, but I think it's fair to say, we'll talk about some later, Prairie Ridge, Huntley, and Cary Grove, top tier, Jacobs. There, but it's a really good football conference, clearly.
Yeah, and I think also part of the reason why a lot of the people in the city sort of brush over the Fox Valley is because they don't play in 8A, a lot of them. Like, I believe Huntley is 8A.
Yeah, Huntley's the only one. The rest are basically
but the rest
6.
are
and
a
they don't
lot
come
smaller.
Down, they don't get around a lot.
Right.
They kind of stay up in their own area, so it's rough. Whereas, the East Suburban Catholic teams, are all over the area. You play in Woodstock, you play in Chicago Heights, so that hurts it a little bit too. I think we got one more.
Yes, next game up is
Naperville Central over Naperville North, 35-7. I was at this one on Friday night.
Big rivalry game.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
This was the first time they played since
2000.
Wow.
The first time at Naperville Central.
Okay.
The game's such a big deal in Naperville, they usually have it at the college at North Central. So this was a lot more people packed into a smaller place, and I've been kind of searching these last 4 years. Sorry, but the fire just isn't there like it is for basketball. I've wanted to see the places where people really cared, and I knew it was going to be probably DuPage Valley. That's the big football hotbed, and it did not disappoint. The student sections, both of them were so into the game, which is something I haven't seen a lot of places. The kids are at the game, but not so much into it. But Naperville North and Naperville Central, both of them were. It was a lot of fun, beautiful weather, great night, and Peyton Thorne, man. I saw him against Lincoln Way East last week, but yeah, Beth, he's not just the best quarterback this year. He's the best quarterback I've seen.
I'm not going to pat myself on the back.
Yeah,
I'll pat you on the back.
He's good.
He's very, very good.
Western Michigan got a really good recruit.
And that's not, he still has to sign, right?
Yeah, it wouldn't shock me. It would not shock me to see bigger schools.
There were people talking at the Loyola game up in the press box and stuff, wondering if there was going to be some bigger schools coming in for Peyton Thorne. Because, you look at the numbers, 286 yards, 4 touchdowns. That's good. It's not some stupendous thing, but just the way he played. I mean, that game was on WCIU. I'm sure anybody who watched it, we don't see that kind of quarterbacking around here very often.
In this area.
So for those of you that were after me, I still had an 0-2 team in the Super 25 after last week. I mean, finally Naperville Central got a win, and a pretty big one at that. You have a kid like that on your team, once things start to click, you're probably going to win.
Right.
Yeah, it's
more often than not.
100%.
The other kid to mention from that one, somebody from Naperville North, Elijah Jordan, a sophomore running back, was really good, 92 yards. And, things were kind of bogged down for them. They weren't really stretching the field much. So those were kind of 92 yards under duress from a sophomore. So that was pretty impressive.
Our last game to review before we go on to our previews, which you all know I'm super excited about, I keep referencing, is the Notre Dame-Marist game, which Beth and I were both at. A very exciting second half. The first half got off to a very slow start, although Marist defense did a great job shutting down Ty Gavin. That was, I think, the biggest takeaway from the first half.
Ty Gavin ended up the whole game with around 100 yards.
Which
Ty
is
Gavin,
not, yeah, that is
he
rare.
is a very good running back, and Marist keyed in on him in a very succinct, very efficient manner. One of the things, my biggest takeaways about Marist was their defense, and I think that's probably part of the reason why the first half felt a little slow, right? Was because there wasn't a ton of points scored. It was a very defensive-led battle. Marist defense, and we were talking about this after the game, Annie and I were, they didn't tackle one or two. It was all 11 guys. It was you don't go down, you go down as a team, or they don't go down at all.
Which coaches say that though all the time. We preach.
This was really watching it with my eyes, seeing Marist, 6 Marist guys take one person down.
Right.
And I really think that type of camaraderie and teamwork is why we'll see Marist continue to succeed this season, honestly.
Absolutely. Michael Marquette. He got off to a slow start, but things started clicking for him in the second half. I thought he looked really impressive in the second half.
He
the skill players
surprised me.
Right.
He pleasantly surprised me. I knew that I had heard his name. I hadn't seen him live. And I actually think that Marist, we were at the beginning of the season talking about how in the top 10, the defense was really the theme. Marist offense is actually much more than serviceable. They're good. Yeah,
definitely. I mean, their wide receivers, Jaden Thompson, Billy Skolinski, super impressive. Skolinski had that 15-yard touchdown run at the end of the game that won Marist the game. And I mean, Skolinski, when you look at him, you wouldn't outright think he's some superstar wide receiver, but he's super talented. A great team player, for sure. So shout out to Skolinski for winning his team that game. Just kidding, it's a team effort, obviously. Let's get into previewing.
Left,
yeah, we've only got a couple of minutes, so.
Game of the week is Loyola Brother Rice.
Obviously.
It's at Brother Rice. It's going to be very tough for Loyola. That is a pretty fun atmosphere down there. It'll take me an hour and a half to get there from just 9 miles away, and you can't park. It's a wild, fun time. I mean, Brother Rice has surprised. We knew they wouldn't be as bad as last year. They were down a lot
2-7,
last year.
another one.
But I mean, with a win here, they could
take the Catholic League.
Yeah, they could be in the driver's seat in the Catholic League Blue.
I think with a win here, and they are in the driver's seat for the Catholic League Blue.
I would be terrified of facing Loyola after a loss to Mount Carmel, though. That's going to be,
I would be terrified to be at Loyola's practice after losing to Mount Carmel.
Yeah, they're going to have a big plan for sure. We'll keep it rolling here. St. Charles East at Wheaton-Warrenville South. Beth talked a little bit about Wheaton-Warrenville South. St. Charles East just has been really steady and moving all year. Barrington at Evanston. It's kind of fun to have Evanston talking about. They've got a really good running back that's had a great year. We've talked a little bit about Barrington today. HF and Bolingbrook, that's where Beth is going to be on Friday night. Notre Dame and Bennett. We're going to see if Notre Dame can get a win over a solid but not spectacular Bennett team. And then the Fox Valley matchup, Cary Grove Huntley. Cary Grove maybe find their way into the rankings.
I think the rankings change after this week. So that means someone outside of the rankings has got to be somebody in the rankings for that to happen.
Okay, we've got 2 minutes left. Quickly, this time next week, what will we be discussing? O'Brien, you're up first.
Probably not Joliet West's win over Oswego, but I'm going to keep mentioning that, so hopefully they can use it as motivation. I think we will probably be discussing the winner of Bolingbrook HF. I'm guessing one of them will really impress and maybe rise up. I guess their kind of overall public perception will be higher because they'll have a huge win under their belt. I guess Quentin Pringle is the guy who's been doing it for Bolingbrook, and we all know Anthony Williams Jr., the Simeon transfer the last few years. He's going to Michigan State, but if you've got a running back better than the guy going to Michigan State,
that's not a bad situation.
I think we're going to be talking about Brother Rice's win over Loyola. That's just me. I'm going to keep it short. That's all I'm going to say. Brother Rice's win over Loyola. Beth,
I think we're talking about Wheaton-Warrenville South entering the Sleeper 25 with the win over St. Charles East, which is a tough one because their running back Justin Jett is quite good.
Oh, and we should mention, Henry Hartsfield on the live stream brings it up. The Brother Rice Loyola game will be on Brother Rice TV.
Wow.
If you haven't watched Brother Rice TV, it's hilarious and kind of awesome. I believe it's just on YouTube. The kids do it. They produce it. They do like Sports Center type stuff, and it's super fun. I'm usually at the game, so I don't get to see it, but definitely find Brother Rice TV.
All right, tune in to Brother Rice TV. We'll also be at that game, so tune into our coverage as well. Just a reminder, throughout the week, we will have everything you need when it comes to high school sports on Sun-Times High School.
SuntimesHighSchoolSports.com.
Thank
Sorry,
you,
that's
Michael
a bit fast.
O'Brien. There you go.
SuntimesHighSchoolSports.com.
Thank you guys so much for tuning in. We will be back.